Well, CAD software allows the use of layers, and it's important to learn to manage layers in a CAD drawing relatively confidently. To illustrate, I have here a layer called L-dim. If I pick a dimension here, which is a dimension for accurately placing an arc, you can see that if you look into the property, it's an aligned dimension, and it's on a layer called L-dim. So the layers are really important. I could turn off the dim layer if I wanted to. You'll notice also in the front garden here, if I zoom in, there are also some dimensions which are used for marking out that elaborate curved garden bed. But can you see that the planting gets in the way of the dimensions? So what I can do now is go to my layer stack, and provided I put all of my planting on a layer called L-planting, and that's the notation I use for anything to do with landscape work, starts with L-, and we'll turn off the planting layer. And you see now we can set some points along the curve of the garden bed edging, set a point at an appropriate spot on the existing footprint of the house, and give pairs of aligned dimensions that indicate where that precise marker point will be. So then I can return here and turn off the dim layer here, turn my planting layer back on, and everything returns to normal. In layout space, I've got a layer called All Planting, and there is no sign of the dimension layer. But if I come over here to Team Garden Area, what I'm going to use this for is to show the dimension layer. So I'll come back into the model, I'll turn on my dimensioning layer, and in it goes. And although it looks a little messy and confusing, when we go to the layout called All Planting, there's no sign of the dimension layer itself. That's because gCADPlus allows you to select a floating viewport, right click and go to Viewport Layers, and in this instance I've turned off the dim layer just for that floating viewport. If I go to the Team Rear Garden, now because I've turned the dimensioning layer on, all the dimensioning that will enable me to set out the shapes in the rear garden are there, so I could print that off for the construction team and do the same for information on the front garden area. So you can see layers really important, and you can move entities from one layer to another if you want. If I pick this vehicle symbol, you can see it's on layer 0, and I might want to put it on a layer called Drive, and I've got another layer here I think called Drive. The edge of the garden bed is on a layer called Edging. This is not my drawing, but that's the way this particular drawing has been done. And although I recommend you use layers, try and keep the number of layers to a relatively small group. If we go back to our layer stack, we've got a layer for dimensions, a layer for the images that I'll show in a moment, a notes layer, existing plants and construction, and a shadow layer and a symbol layer. Could also be part of the mix, but there are lots of others in this particular instance. Now what I want to illustrate is the use of images to make life a little easier for your client to convey what these symbols in the landscape plan represent. What I've done is create another layer called Images, and in this instance, as I don't have a floating viewport, I'm simply placing images directly onto this page and lining them up. So, and I'm starting to use a symbol through here. So Acer palmatum, I've put 3 individual examples of it. Let's move on to another one called Images 2, and I'll show how that's done. The simplest way is to use a companion tool to gCADPlus, which is this one, and let's imagine that we're trying to show Lagostomia indica, the crepe myrtle, and I'm using the plant database application. Remember, that's the one where you can just scroll through in alphabetical list of species, and then you can scroll through images so we can get a close-up of the crepe myrtle and a habit of the crepe myrtle. So the image itself, there's a URL to a website, but importantly I've stored the image, and the path to that image I can just highlight and copy and go back into gCADPlus. I can use draw and raster image. I can add, simply now we have copied the path from our plant database file, and then I can insert it, and all I need to do is draw some sort of box like so, and there is the image. It's the symbol that belongs to the image, and I can put some text and name along there. Let's just see if we can get back to here, move through, pick up the close-up and do the same thing. We'll copy that, return here, and draw and raster image, add a new one, paste the path to my local hard disk where that image is stored, and we'll just draw another little box. So you can see we've got two really quite high resolution images that clearly show our client what is happening. Those two images, if we select one of them, went in on the current layer, which was layer 0. So I'd be inclined to select both of them and then change them to an images layer, and that's now done. That just keeps things tidy. So we can have several layout sheets with the images on them. Here are 3 examples of the use of the Acer palmatum, the Japanese maple. So the client can get a really good idea of what that particular specimen will look like. So I'm managing that by layers. I'm using in combination the plant database that we use, and things are starting to take shape. So there's an awful lot to learn and to use in landscape CAD software. It takes a little while to gain facility, but once you do, you can produce drawings, valuable drawings for clients.